Explosive developments tonight in the search for 5-year-old Nevaeh Buchanan. Investigators, friends, family intensify their search for this precious child. But now, one of the persons of interest in this case fighting back, insisting, quote, "I didn't take her, and I definitely didn't kill her," end quote. George Kennedy insists he was actually a father figure to the little girl. That even though he is a convicted sex offender who is not supposed to be getting up close and personal with kids. The missing child's own mom hotly defends Kennedy as not being involved. The question is, was Kennedy just a friend of little Nevaeh's mom, or was he at one point her boyfriend? He was arrested on the very night Nevaeh went missing on a parole violation. A bloody towel found in his motel room made him seem very suspicious until cops found out the blood was not a match to little Nevaeh's. Kennedy says the blood was from him shaving and his new girlfriend's tattoo. Whatever. So, why haven't cops cleared him as a person of interest? Again, Jennifer Buchanan, little Nevaeh's mom, standing by her sex offender friend.
I did not whatsoever feel like he had anything to do with it.
But is Jennifer telling the truth about that day? Some wonder.
Jennifer, if you know anything, you know, please come on. This has been long enough. We need Nevaeh home.
That's from the child's grandmother on the father's side, and it's quite an accusation. We will talk to Nevaeh's biological dad about what he thinks in a moment. Straight to my expert panel, Stacey Honowitz, Florida prosecutor, Mike Gaynor, retired NYPD detective and president of East Coast Detectives, Curtis Lewa, founder of the Guardian Angels, and Michelle Sagona, national correspondent for America's Most Wanted. Michelle, you have been tracking this case from the start. What is the very latest?
The very latest at this point is that the Monroe County Sheriff's Office says that as of 11 o'clock this morning, they've received 945 leads in on this case. And that's a lot, considering it's been just a little under 2 weeks. At this point, they are not going out and doing searches, but if they do get in information that will lead them to a particular area, they will send out a search team. In addition, what the sheriff told me this morning was that if they get in information on specific suspects or persons of interest in general, that they will go out there, they will execute a search warrant, they will do whatever is possible to try to dig up more clues and information on this particular case. And you mentioned George Kennedy. He is still a person of interest at this time. He's being held on a parole violation along with his friend Roy Smith. They're still both behind bars, and what the sheriff says is that within the next day or two that they will probably be shipped back to prison and facing those charges for the parole violation, not for Nevaeh's disappearance.
Yeah, well, Nevaeh's mom, Jennifer, she's come under really intense criticism for befriending not one but two sex offenders. George Kennedy is one of them. He, of course, as we've been discussing, says he has had absolutely nothing to do with this. In fact, he helped look for little Nevaeh. Now, he is a convicted sex offender, Stacey Honowitz. His crime was 4th-degree sexual assault or rape of a 15-year-old girl behind a gas station in 1998. That is a heinous crime, but it is quite different than, let's say, a predator who goes after a 5-year-old girl. One of the problems with this labeling of sex offenders is that it's often hard to parse out the child sex predators from the average sexual offender.
Well, that's true, Jane, but the bottom line is he is a convicted sex offender, and so it goes back to everything we've been talking about. Did she knowingly put her child in danger by associating with this person? And he just really messed himself up by admitting that he had contact with her, because that's the parole violation. As a convicted sex offender, he's not permitted to have contact with this child. He wants his name to be cleared. He's claiming he's never been with her. This is what the police are going to be investigating, because now he has an alibi. I believe he said he was fishing at the time with this new girlfriend. So just because the blood didn't match in the apartment, thank God, now they're going to investigate this alibi. So he's certainly not in the clear as of yet, and now he's going to have to answer the parole violation. But the idea that they're all grouped together, until the legislature decides to break them all down, they all have to be looked at.
All right, panel, hold tight. I want to bring in a very special guest, Nevaeh's biological father, Shane Inohosa. Shane, thank you so much for joining us during what has got to be a horrific, hellish time for you. We've heard conflicting reports about your ex's lie detector test. You know, what did Nevaeh's mom tell you about whether or not she passed?
Well, the only thing that she told me was she did fail one question, and the question was, are you still involved with George Kennedy? And I guess the needle started bouncing outrageous, so that's the only thing she told me.
How do you feel about the fact that not only is she friends or possibly at one point boyfriend and girlfriend with this George Kennedy, and you can clarify that, but that she's defending him?
Well, I don't like that she's defending him, and I feel that, I feel upset about, Jenny taking, my daughter around the sex offender. She should have never did it. And I asked her, why did you take her around them? And the only response that I got from her was she looked down and shrugged her shoulders.
Now, this guy is saying he is a father figure to the child who is now missing. You're the biological father. How does that strike you?
Oh,
Hello? Well, obviously it must have upset him a lot. And we're going to go back to our panel. Curtis Lewa, you're hearing all this. You're hearing the biological father saying that he's really upset that the mother of his child was allowing the child to be with convicted sex offenders.
Well, Kennedy comes in and bogarts the situation and says, I'm going to be the father figure. And I must tell you, Jane, I must disagree with you. He rapes a 15-year-old behind the gas station does not mean he is not capable of lowering the age level and raping either girls younger or girls older. He's a rapist. He did it once. He can do it again and again and again. He's a danger to society. He should be kept out of that house.
Curtis, I was just saying that sexual predators that focus on children from a psychological perspective are often aroused by totally different things, and they're not the same type to go after a 15 or even a 13-year-old. I mean, I'm not saying they can't change and become child sexual predators, but I think that there's a slight difference there. I mean, Michelle Segota, you've covered so many of these cases. What's your insight into that?
Well, at this particular point, from what he said, from what George Kennedy said when he spoke out, was that, look, I may have been convicted of a crime in the past, but I'm not, have no intentions on hurting Nevaeh, of hurting her friends, of, going down that route at all. I am a father figure to her. And what Jennifer says is that, look, he was only around my child 15% of the time. The other 85% I spent with him.
But Mike
that
Gator...
doesn't make a difference. That makes no difference at all. I mean, and that's usually people that affiliate with sex offenders, that's the first thing they're going to say. They've never been alone with my child. Well, if you had a fear to begin with of leaving them alone, why would you even let your child go around them? So that makes no sense.
Mike Gator, this guy, George Kennedy, this is the weirdest thing. He's a father himself of a 12-year-old girl and an 18-year-old boy. He's a father of 2 teenage kids himself.
Well, we already know by now, Jane, anybody can make a baby. Kennedy is a creep. He's going back to prison where he belongs. If he was convicted of raping a 15-year-old, he's capable of doing anything. Now, of course, they're still calling him a person of interest, and they're going to have to check out this alibi once again. But whether he was actually physically present during any time that something happened, it doesn't mean that he didn't have something to do with it. These guys sometimes work in teams. Look at his buddy Smith. He's driving his van. And ironically, they got this guy Easter who likes to flash himself around town. So we got some people over here of interest, or suspects, if you will.
You're right. There's 3 persons of interest. This past weekend, cops questioned another man, James Easter, about Nevaeh. He was arrested on unrelated charges, and a judge said he is no longer a person of interest. However, Easter told the Detroit News that during his 12 hours of questioning, he mistakenly answered the question, how do you think they did it, by saying, if he had abducted the child, he would have taken, quote, my vehicle behind the nail salon nearby and called to her with a Kit Kat, end quote. Curtis Lewa, what a bizarre thing to say when you're trying to convince cops that you're not an abductor. Why would anybody answer a question like that?
Oh, what a first-class Secola. This guy has all the furniture upstairs and rearranged in the wrong rooms. He thinks he's being helpful. This gives us insight into the thought process. Now, this is the flasher. This is the weenie waver. My God, how far would this guy go? He's already thinking, gee, if I was in that position, this is how I'd lure the child in. What a bunch of first-class Secolas.
Yeah, but Stacey, the chances of all these men being involved is highly remote, and they're dragging all these people in. And as James Easter said, they basically ruined my life. They upset my apartment. They accused me of all sorts of things. Now my name is Mud. I mean, when are they going to eliminate these people as persons of interest if they're not involved?
They're going to eliminate them when they have the right person, because imagine if they never called these people in, Jane. You'd have outrage. They're all convicted sex offenders who had contacted this woman. They had no choice, the police, but to interview all of them.
We're going to continue this debate in a moment. Why do you